Hey, how you doing? Welcome back, welcome back to another music lesson, and this is for beginners. We're going to talk about some of the basics of music. We're going to really break it down today to the most fundamental building block of music, the scale, and understanding and really we're gonna dig into how this thing called a scale is put together. And really, kind of the objective of this presentation is to provide you some basic knowledge and an appreciation, really an appreciation for this gift, this beautiful gift that God gave us. It's called music. What a language! And he has interlaced this thing called music into the very fabric of the entire universe. And all he created, there's music, there's harmony, there's resonance, and it all fits a very simple pattern, but at the same time, it's so complicated that we as men and women, we've spent our lives trying to perfect this, and we never have, and probably never will. If you think about it, all the music you've ever heard, all the songs, millions and millions of songs have sang, and millions of songs have been written, but it all follows a very basic pattern, and it really comes down to what I call the number seven notes. Now, what we're going to teach here is going to be very basic. So if you want to get better, you're going to have to practice. Be diligent. Practice, and really get to understand this thing. So, what are some of the things we're going to talk about in this lesson? I broke it up into two parts. Probably do two videos because it'll get a little bit long. Part one, we're going to talk about the basic scale, how it was put together. Then we'll look at musical notes on that scale and the semitones. We'll talk about that. Talk about understanding half steps and whole steps and all the different types of steps that's required to put together and build the scale. Part two of this, we'll talk about then taking that scale, and then we're going to build a chord. And from that chord, we're going to go into simple progression. And at the end, you're going to actually learn to play a song. Yeah. Actually, the one I was kind of playing around with at the intro, Amazing Grace. And it's a very simple song that follows a very simple scale. We're going to stay in the key of C because C is pretty easy because it's all the white keys. You don't have to worry about the black keys. But we're going to move there later on. Okay, so let's get into this. But before I do, you know me, I always like to have some type of biblical references. You know, when you think about music throughout the Bible, and how God ordained this thing. Even from the Old Testament, all the way back into Genesis chapter 4, verse 21, where he talked about Jubal, who was the father of all musicians, because God put that thing in him early. Oh, because worship was built into this creation early on. And then Miriam, if you know Moses' sister, after they crossed the Red Sea, she picked her and the ladies picked the timbrels, and they were singing and they were dancing. We all know about Jericho, but afterwards, they sang. So and then David came. And really, if you're going to talk about worship and music, you got to really talk about David. Really, if you go back to the First Samuel, that's when it really tells you how he played for King Saul. When King Saul had this spirit that would come upon him and get him frustrated, David would come and play and soothe him. So the power of music has been just weaved throughout the Bible. But really, when we think about worship and corporate worship, really the genesis of that started around First Chronicles. If you get a chance, go back and read First Chronicles chapter 25, because that lays out how David ordained and handpicked the musicians and the singers and the worshipers, and he put them in teams, sets of teams so that no matter which group of Levites were ministering in the tabernacle, there were a set of musicians and a set of singers who ministered with them. Now, as we go into the New Testament, things kind of change up a little bit, if you think about it, because in the Old Testament there's a lot written about music. In the New Testament, there isn't so much. Why? Think about that for a second. I'll let you think about that. Then I'll come back and ask that question again. Because when we think about music, even Jesus, what did he do? He sang. And, at Passover, he sang a hymn in Matthew 26:30. Paul and Silas in jail, and they sang. They were singing hymns, and we know what happened there. Earthquake, jail broke open, jailbreak, but nobody left, nobody ran. But then in Ephesians chapter 5:19, as well as Colossians 3:16, Paul makes two very profound statements there, and where he talks about admonishing one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. That's the entire Bible study itself. That's the basis of how we start building and from the New Testament. That song is in your heart now. And then even James talks about singing songs of praise. But as we've gone from the Old Testament to the New Testament, if you think about what happened at crucifixion, when the veil in the temple was rent, you know what that meant? The Holy Spirit, now he indwells in man. So a lot of the pageantry of the Old Testament, where we had to usher in the spirit of the Holy Spirit, and David had all these things within the tabernacle, because God only came down and dwelled in the tabernacle, and only if the priest could enter the Holy of Holies. But now we all have access, so we all have a song. We all have a song in our heart. So am I saying that we don't need choirs and that? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But make melody in your heart. That's where the music starts, right there. Anyway, I can go down this track forever talking about that. All right, so let's go into part one. Here we go, talking about the scales. Okay, if we look at a scale, what is a scale? Scale is basically 7 notes. And think about the numbers. 7. If we know anything about the Bible, 7 is what? The number of completion. And when you get to the end of 7, it goes into 8, which is what new beginnings. So that's exactly what a scale is. So if we look at the key of C, and I'm going to be in C, I'm just going to play a scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then it's back to C. Let's do it again. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So from C to C is what we call an octave, or 8. There's eight notes, C to C. Got that? All right. Moving right along. Now, if you notice, especially on a piano, you see these black keys. What are they there for? Well, that's what we kind of call semitones. All right. What do I mean by that? If from C to D is a tone, or one note, one step, then from that C right there would be a semitone. Let's see. All the way up. So 7 notes, and then if you count those, 12 semitones. And like I said, all the music that you've heard in the world is based on that simple concept right there. Now, you can piece them together, you can change the tempo, you can do a lot of things, and trust me, people have for hundreds and thousands of years worked with music, but it all works on that simple concept right there. Got it? All right. So when we think about these tones and semitones, they move in steps, and that's what we call steps. So let's kind of explain the things with the steps. So if I go from this C to a D, that's called a whole step. Yeah, that's one whole step. And then from D to the E, whole step. Okay, got that? Now, so if there's a whole step, the logic says there must be half steps. And you're exactly right. So if I go from here to there, that's a half step. Here to here is a half step. And any math major, math geniuses that you are, understand that probably 2 half steps equals what? Right, 1 whole step. Look, half step, which is the same as the whole step. So I can go, semitones is moving in half steps. Half steps, all the way up the keyboard, and all the way back. Half steps. When I'm just using tones or this actual scale, I'm moving in these whole steps. Well, actually, to play a scale, which we're going to get to in a minute, it's a combination of whole and half steps. Now, if we understand the whole and half steps, is built on a major scale, is built on a pattern of a whole step, and a half step. Then a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and another half step. You're like, what you talking about, Willis? All right, let's back this. Let's back it up here for a second. There's a pattern. You know, I know we all probably sing this little, you know, in music class, do re mi fa sol la ti do. Well, all you did there was just sung a scale. Now, how did you know which notes to sing, other than the fact that your teacher taught them to you? And how do you know when you hear that yeah, that sounds right? Because it's built on a mathematical equation. 2 whole steps and a half step. 3 whole steps and a half step. That will give you a scale. You don't believe me? Let me show you. I'm going to start with C. And we're going to do a whole step. Whole step. Whole step. Now if you see on the, right here, now it looks a little tricky, doesn't it? Because there's no black key in between this E and the F. Don't worry about that. Stick to the math. Stick to the math. So from here to here would be a half step. Got it? So whole step, half step. I did 2 whole steps and a half step. Now I'm going to do 3 whole steps. Whole step, whole step, whole step, then another half step. That's a scale. And the great thing about this, you can start anywhere on this keyboard. Pick a black key, a white key, it doesn't matter. As long as you stick to the math, you're going to get a scale. And you'll know it when you hear it. All right, you don't believe me? All right, you don't believe me. Okay, I'll show you. Mess around with me. I'll play a scale. That's right. All right, so let's pick this right there. I just happen to know that's A flat or G sharp. But anyway, so let's do the math. I'm going to start here. Now do a whole step, and a half step. Whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And you know, that just gave me the scale in the key of A flat. Not too difficult, is it? And now you're probably wondering, why is this important? Because before you can really start understanding how chords go together and how progressions go together, you really got to lock down this scale. You really got to lock, and this is a major scale that we're playing. All right, so I'm going to move back into the key of C just to keep it easy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right there. Okay, got that? Good. Now, let's go into part 2. We're going to talk about chords. Okay, we played the scales. Now, what I recommend you doing, stop here. Really, stop here. Go back and practice these scales until you understand the math. And so that you can go on your instrument anywhere. And you know what? And even though I'm using a keyboard, yeah, because it's just simple and that's what I play, you can pick up any instrument and you start on a note. Whether it's a saxophone, a guitar, a luthier, an organ, any of those type, any instrument, except maybe drums. But any instrument that plays tones, and the math works. So a C scale on a saxophone. If I was a saxophonist, I would, and someone asked me, "Can you play me a scale?" And I would say, "Yes, I can." Listen, and I would still do the same thing. Whole step, half step. Whole step, whole step, half step. Okay, so now, you got that? Now let's move into chords. So, we've played single notes, or single timbral. You may hear that term if you're looking for keyboards and things. Single timbral, multi-timbral. Single timbral means that you play one note at a time, like a saxophone. That's a single timbral instrument. You can only play one note at a time. A guitar, a piano, organ, those are multi-timbral. What does that mean? I can play multiple notes at one time. Okay, so now to play a chord, that's what we're going to be doing, is playing multiple notes at the same time. Pretty difficult to play a chord on a saxophone because you just get one note out at a time, or any type of horn, basically. You know, that's a single line. All right. So if I'm going to play a chord, chords is a combination of 3 or more notes, basically. And now remember, let's go back to the numbering system, because we can use the numbering system to help build our chords. Okay, when we think about a major chord, it is the 1, remember, the 3, and the 5 in a scale. All right, and we said, where do these numbers come from? And if you in some of my earlier PowerPoints that I had up here, you saw a row of numbers. Because what I can do is take that scale, and every note has a corresponding number. C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, F is 4, G is 5, A is 6, B is 7. And then we get back to C again. That's either, call it an 8 or a 1, because it's the same note. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back. Okay, so that's the numbers we're talking about. So understand what a chord is now. A chord is if I take the 1, the 3, and the 5. I've just played a C major chord. And if you're playing along with me, you just played a C major chord. C, E, G. And talking about patterns, here we go. I got to kind of slip back in that Bible study mode. And when you see the pattern of how God put these things together. What is a chord? 3? Think about the number 3 and how many times that appears in the Bible. The Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. 3 operating as one. And that's where you get unity and harmony. Unity and harmony. All these 3 notes, even though I'm playing them together, but they're all different, but they are in harmony. Mind, body, soul. Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Oh, yes. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now that we have played the C chord, and hopefully we understand how we built that C. It's the 1, the 3, the 5. C, E, G. You just played a chord. You can play it together, or you can play it as an arpeggio, where you play each note separately. Still a C chord. In one of my other lessons, videos, I talked about inversions. Right now I'm just playing these in the root, where it's a C, E, and a G. If I play the first inversion, because no matter which way I play these 3 notes, it's still a C chord. I can play an E, a G, and a C. Still a C chord. It's just a first inversion. Or I can do a G. What's the next note? C, yes. And an E. Second inversion. So, root, first inversion, second inversion. Okay, so right now we're just playing the root position. C, E, G. Okay, that's the C chord. Now, we're going to stay in the key of C, and I'm going to teach you another chord, F. The F chord. So F, which is the 4. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. I went to the 4th. Now, I'm going to use that F as the 1, the root. And the same thing. 1, 3, and a 5. F, A, C. F chord. F, A, C. F chord. Got that one? I'm not going to spend as much time. And let's move to another one. It's the G, or the 5 chord. So in the scale, or the key of C, if I count up 5 notes, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can count to 5. I can do that. That brings me to the G. So I'm going to use that G as the 1 and play the 1, 3, 5. G, B, D. So the 1 chord, C, the 4 chord, F, and the 5 chord, G. Got it? 1 chord, C. 4 chord, F. The 5 chord, G. Now, why did I randomly pick those? Because in a scale, in any scale, the 1, the 4, and the 5 are what we call the major chords in that scale. They're the dominant chords. And you know why that's important? Because you can play 80% of the hymns in most hymn books. If you can play what we call a 1, 4, 5 progression, you can play them. As a matter of fact, when we get to the end here, we're going to do Amazing Grace in the key of C using those 3 chords. That's all we're going to use is those 3 chords. Now it's going to sound blocked and choppy because we're not going to add anything fancy to it, because I want you to understand the concept. So a C, F, G. three major chords. Now, there are other chords on the scale. Yes, there are. We're going to get to those in another lesson later on. But right now, we're just going to stay with those three chords. 1, the 4, and the 5. Okay, so now, you with me? So now we're going to talk about chord progressions, as we've been talking about, like with Amazing Grace. We're going to play, because now I've taken those chords and I have a logical progression, how I can progress with these chords. So, here we go. Here we go. You and me. We're going to do Amazing Grace. And all we're going to play are those three chords. Now, the song Amazing Grace, it actually starts on the 5 chord of G. Then it goes to the C. Amazing Grace. How? Where are we going to go? To the 4. Sweet the sound. Back to the 1. Now it goes to the second line that Save the Wretch Like Me. Back to the G. That save a wretch. Right there on the 1. And then we're going to go up to the 5 again. Like me. I, to the 1. Once was lost. To the 4. But now I'm, where are we going to go? To the 1. Found. Last line. Was blind. To the 5. Was blind. But now 5. I see. Alright, let's try that one more time. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. See that? Amazing Grace. Yeah, did it sound choppy? Of course it did. Because why? We're beginners. But hopefully you see the pattern. 1, 4, 5. And there's so many songs and hymns you can play with that same 1, 4, 5 progression. Okay, there you have it. Trust me, if you just spend time just going through this, and if you can nail this, you can lock this down. What I mean by this, not just Amazing Grace, but the concept of scales, chords, and progression. And really, it all starts with scales, chords build on top of that, and from there we get progressions that we build out our songs. Take your time, hit the rewind over and over, practice it, and I guarantee, if you're diligent and you practice this, you'll nail it. You're gonna nail it. And the great thing about it is that now, if you understand the scales, it's like learning a new language, because now you can communicate with other musicians. Because especially musicians who play by ear, you'll be able to communicate, and you can play with, if they're wherever they're playing, they can tell you, okay, this is a 1, 4, 5 progression. And what key? On the key of C? Ah, got it. Even if I don't even know the song, I know the progression. I can pick it up. All right, listen, time for me to go. This video ran a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but you know what? I think it's good information, and I think you'll be blessed if you really put in the time and the diligence and the effort, and be diligent about doing this. All right. Keep playing, keep practicing, keep praising. And I'm out.